I'm Sarah, and today I just wanted to talk about GB Studio games I think you should play. So first I'm just going to quickly talk, what is GB Studio? It's an engine to make Game Boy or Game Boy Color games. It's easy to learn, and there's lots of tutorials online as to how to use it. It's very lightweight, so opposite of Unreal. It's drag and drop visual scripting, so you don't need programming knowledge in order to use it. And you can export your games as a browser game or a GB-ROM and play it on an actual Game Boy. So first game I want to talk about is Mary's Errands. This is a game I love. You explore the town, finish your chores, and give gifts to villagers, and it takes 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, this is what it looks like. That's the link by Dot Moon. Next one is An Autumn With You by Leaf Thief. So visit your nana in the countryside and meet some magical spirits. 15 to 20 minutes of gameplay. And yeah, it's kind of like Totoro, or it reminded me of Totoro, if you know that. Next one is Small Town Emo by FNAF Games. So it's set in like 2007, so if you like that vibe, this is for you. Play as Ken and try to confess your feelings to your best friend Fergus. And yeah, this one is 1 hour and 25 minutes of gameplay. And I think right now it's a demo with the full game coming out soon. And the next one is The Year After by Hadrian Lin. Walk through time, seasons pass, characters age. So it's very much like passage of time kind of game. And yeah, you can kind of see with GB Studio, you can have different color palettes as well. And of course, I should probably shill my own game. Children of the Flower, so join an undercover gang to undermine your town's local cult and exterminate the Godflower, 15 to 30 minutes. Also to mention, all these games are free to play online. Don't cost any money, so you can check them out immediately after this. But yeah, honestly, with GB Studio, the possibilities of making games are endless. There's a lot of demakes online, so people taking very 3D games or modern games and making them into GB ROMs. And then you can also make platformers with GB Studio. You can make autobiographical works like visual novels, things like that. And you can also make arcade-style games with GB Studio. So I just highly recommend you check it out. Thank you, that's it.
Hello, everyone. I thought I'd just spend 5 minutes reading some microfiction that I'd written after getting inspired by using Midjourney to create AI art. This little bit of world building is called Venus Terraformed. In the future, Venus is habitable. An annular mirror array deflects entirely the glare of an otherwise deadly sun. Smaller satellite mirrors revolve around the planet, creating days and nights. The atmosphere is cold and dust dry. Although humans are able to walk directly on Venusian soil without a pressure suit, oxygen masks are still required outdoors. For shelter, engineers make use of silicate-based microbes, which grow massy material that is to be molded into dwellings. Drone teams act as one big mobile 3D printer, squeezing and spraying silicate material according to an agreed blueprint. Once the material has been laid down in a shape, the microbes are killed by applying heat, which also hardens the building into its final form. Indoors, engineered plants designed for the purpose pump out oxygen for breathing as they photosynthesize. Buildings generally sit above covered artificial pools that are the entire footprint of the structure, the evaporation of which cools the inhabitants. Water feeds a cycle of growth and decay. In contrast to the hostile planet outside, the interior is moist and alive. The pools contain cyanobacteria, which byproducts feed the plants, which supply oxygen to the entire abode. The plants sit in giant hydroponic pools of nutrient-dense liquid. Every few days, the entire jungle is lifted out whole out of its watery bath, and dead plant matter is sluiced out from under them. This compost is valuable, as its decomposition generates natural gas, the burning of which releases more water for the cycle. The same cycle of life, giving life, is happening outside, but with plants that are hellishly fast-growing. They are the verdant machinery that have the gargantuan task of oxygenating the atmosphere of Venus on a planetary scale. Scale is rather a weak word to describe the sheer industrial sprawl of unchecked terrascaping growth needed to make Venus's atmosphere breathable for future generations. Genetic technology has given monstrous birth to a bare minimum of a few sibling monocultures who are set to work covering Venus in a barely controlled cancer. Droid armies zoom through the nitrous air, following an invisible network of air highways. Cropping, cutting, transplanting, monitoring, they observe and manage the rivers of green mass that hurry across the temperate geography of Venus. Every single drop is maximally leveraged using underground irrigation systems, the only sewers known to be completely silent of rats. That same water had previously enjoyed eons of solitude as Jupiter's ice moon Europa, its serenity now disturbed by mining operations spanning centuries. Europa's face is crazed with craters, each dark dimple counting out the human generations taken to empty it. Slingshot satellites pivot huge blocks of ice on an interplanetary path, whilst on the dark side of the moon, the sling receives frozen blocks of carbon dioxide as Venusian tribute, like the Moroccan emirs and Italian princes trading sugar for Carrara marble. Back on Venus, the mirrors trace their eastward arc down to the horizon through a gauzy twilight sky. The gloaming draws the eye to milky streaks low in the atmosphere around Venus's northern pole. Europa's gifts are powdering it with ever more snow. Full dark reveals an acre upon acre of small methane flames on the ground, which burn up natural gas as it forms from purposefully buried plant matter. The land, with its gentle tilt, shows a field of blue tongues shifting and rolling with the breeze. Thank you.
So I guess I'll just show you things I've made that I haven't really gotten much feedback on. So bear with me, I'm literally just going to my portfolio site. So this is just, I'm not trying to do anything. I don't want to be like too desperate about doing this stuff. But basically, I made this game a long time ago for my bachelor's degree. And I tried to sell it as like a liminal piece to now play this last year, and I think there were just too many better things that were available. And then I kind of lost the motivation to keep working on it because I didn't have like a place to show it to people. And so now it just hasn't been worked on for like consistently for a long time. But essentially, I'll just let the video play. But it's a game where you play as like in a black and white world as a girl in a world that used to be a tropical island that's been taken over by an alien who now forces you to play card games with them so that you can maybe save your planet. And it was meant to be this absurdist like roguelike loop where you play a card game with this guy and then you realize he can't do anything. But you end up just playing the game obsessively. And so the idea was to create, it was basically me trying to do too many things because you'll start to think of all the problems that come from making a game like this. Because you have to make a card game that works, and you have to make a card game that fits in the world, and then you have to make it fun to do the loop, which I don't think I succeeded in doing. But I think the core of the game is still something that's quite important to me, and I've been trying to figure out how to make it work, where like it can be exciting, but it gets the point across. So like, yeah. So I'm just rambling because I did not plan any of this, but. It doesn't work online because I don't have an online build of it, so I just have like a downloadable now, so it'd be a bit hard to show you. But yeah, wait, this is the really rough like card game UI, heavily inspired by the typical like TCG games. Because I was thinking a lot about how you play those games a lot of the time to like get to just for that competitive thing, but the community kind of isn't very Like I don't really play TCGs for the community, if I'm going to be honest. I play it because I like the game and I like the people I play them with. But the community can sometimes always feel a bit like sometimes it's hard to get to like there's a disconnect, and like, why are you playing the TCG? So I guess that's kind of why I wanted to make this about, which is like exploring the obsessive loop of like a card game, like that you play in a community where, you know, maybe it's not clear without the game why you'd be together in the first place. But yeah, so I don't know. It was very experimental, and I think at this point in my like design and art making career, I'm trying to figure out how to make it all like linked together and like communicate the things I care about, without making it as kind of a messy explosion of concepts in one thing. Yeah, because otherwise I don't know if any of this is making any sense to anyone. But, oh, it was in Unity. Yeah, and I did a lot of the narrative design and world building by myself, and all the art is by me. And it's very rough art because I spent a long time trying to program it myself and design it myself, and I eventually managed to have time to make more art by asking a friend to program it for me a bit more. So the card game wasn't programmed by me; it was just the design of it was like, but the programming and stuff, I managed to get someone to help me do. So it was just that in Unity, yeah.
It might not be too hard to export into WebGL.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. That might be worth it.
You have about a minute left.
Okay, but anyway, does anyone want to say stuff? Yeah, I would love some feedback about what. Yeah.
Seems like you've got a really interesting idea there that might be benefited if you extrapolate a little bit from the TCG means tabletop card game, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Extrapolate a little bit away. See that as an execution of a principle that sits behind it, which is something about kind of utility or habit or something like
Yeah.
that. And I think if you can like generalize that, maybe we can talk after, but basically I think if you're talking about the kind of mechanics and why do people play play this kind of game, and isn't it a bit futile and why they keep coming back, it already feels like very niche, but if you can just kind of like, that's something that takes place in a lot of other contexts,
Yeah.
right? So I think if you can just like pull back a bit, like move it up a level, and that might help you in terms of the narrative. So that's the terms I think of. But
Yeah.
that might help you with the narrative, and then the problem about the card game itself becomes a little bit simpler.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk to you more about it later. But thanks for that. Okay.
Could you share? Is it on? Do you say the downloadable link is on that?
Yeah. It's a little bit. Yeah. It's on itch. So like the link over here. It's there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. I've been trying to find the motivation to like go back into it, but I think I would love feedback to figure out where I can best put like some effort for like, some focused energy on, like, But thank you for listening, guys.
Hiya. For a bit of context, I'm working in games research support at the moment, but my master's looked at indie game production. So I'm just going to run through some of the concepts that came out of that, specifically around sort of hidden challenges for indie game production, so things that you might not consider when starting a studio as an issue, but which did tend to come up as like a point of either difficulty or just were under-considered. So challenge number one, network sourcing. So despite the fact that there are some more formal sites to hire people in games, and even in indies, like Work with Indies, generally they are used in conjunction with other forms of networking, so in person at conferences, or Discord servers, or Slack, or via Twitter. So essentially, if you're trying to find people, or even if you're trying to get hired, particularly in indie, there is no defined route to that. People basically use a bricolage. The only thing that tended to emerge was that there is still a heavy use of sort of secondary validation. So you might have someone who is recommended by a friend or by a colleague or someone you worked with before, or even the source of the networking can be recommended. So someone may tell you to go to that Slack to go like post your job offering and things like that. So unsurprisingly, networking is still key, but as to exactly how or when to do it, I'm sorry to report everything everywhere all at once. Sorry, that's the facts. Second is hidden production work. So this is covering a large umbrella from like biz dev to legal to finance to HR to marketing to production to PM when it comes to indie, where all this might be separated in like a larger company. But essentially, people who start up indie studios often don't have experience of having to run these teams. They're like an artist or they're a programmer and they've worked in their discipline, but they haven't had to run work across disciplines. So a lot of what emerges is basically that this is work they have not done before. It is across an enormous scope, and it is the kind of work that usually records like a large amount of resources, but they have to do it on their own. So essentially, obviously, whatever help you can get it, but a lot of people end up having to use sort of templates or advice from other people who've produced their first game or a couple of games, basically piecing it together as they go along. All those areas are very important to actually managing to make a game. Like project management and producer work is important to controlling your scope so you actually produce a finished game. A big problem in indie, you can sort of circle the drain. But it's also important to do things like marketing and planning and your biz dev and even things like your contracts with other people you might hire for like piecemeal work. So again, no perfect solutions there other than be aware of it early so you can start planning some of these areas earlier on, because a lot of the time when it becomes a problem, it's that people are playing catch-up essentially. Like they start in their discipline maybe with like a demo or a vertical slice, and they're having to figure everything else out kind of at a running pace as they come up nearer to release. And finally, the challenges of indie creative direction. So if you start up an indie studio, usually it's that people already have a concept in mind. They've been maybe like tinkering or iterating with something on their own or with a small team. But there is a nuance to being indie where when people decide to go indie, they often want more freedom and more control. So they want more say over like the final product, and they want more of their sort of the bones of it to have a say in it. But if you are the head of an indie studio or a project, you still have to control that project so that it's releasable. Like, eventually everything has to be cohesive and has to be finished. So again, throwing back to the challenges of indie like production, you will have to be able to be good at communicating with people and explaining why things do not go and if they don't. So generally the balance tends to be that you give a great deal of respect to your collaborators in their specific discipline. So at some level it's a give and take. Like if you have your designer or your artist, maybe let them have a little bit more say in like the art style, like how the game looks. But if you have to cut something off because you think it's drifting too far away from the vision, communicate the why. So having game pillars, having a little bit of a design document can be helpful in this because it's explaining why certain ideas have to be vetoed. Like it's going too far away from the creative vision. And it's also why the production area can be useful, because if you understand your timeline and your resources, you can explain why there are material reasons why that idea can't be put into the game, because you don't have the time, or because it's a new concept and like looking at the amount of people you might have to hire to like get it to a finished point is unrealistic. So again, just 3 things to maybe think about if you're an indie, if you know indies. Obviously, good luck to all of you. And if you want to talk about like the nightmare that is the market at the moment, feel free to talk to me, oh God. Or about Gothic liminality, actually, because I studied that from undergraduate. So we're all liminal here, just floating in space. But that's me. So thanks.
Actually, that was a very good talk. And as a quick, where do I come from? I'll probably slot in there. Just say I wrote a game called Floor 13. Which is on Steam. I think it's Floor 13 Deep State. And just to connect in, I was a small indie, but I had a good producer who used to be a Sony manager. So that's that little hard in that you do need. Without that, I'd be a bit in the air. So when we visited different studios, they go, "Oh yeah, I know you because you literally the reason our studio is still here because you bought things." So that was a big help. We had 2 artists. We had an artist. We had a technical sort of design artist as well. We had 2 people doing sound. I didn't realise that you have sort of 2 people, one person designing sound and one person doing music, one person doing general sound. The artist thing was a bit of a surprise because I had 3D sections, but there was also somebody doing lighting. This is something I didn't know because the lighting parts are so complicated now. That's often done by somebody else. So there we go. So, and again, working with a team does take a lot of milestones and so forth, and just to connect in quite a lot of organisation between the little bits. I'm not a natural manager, and just because you know your game, that doesn't mean you know how everyone works. So you also have to sort of, I had another developer, I was using Unity, and I was quite familiar, but not very familiar with it. He was more familiar with it, and little things like connection, things like using plastic, that's the SCM system that Unity now use, and getting the artists to use that properly. Big problem. All developers, we all use Git, we all know SCM, we do that backwards. Artists, no idea. So you have to work a little bit with them. So that's a little bit of a clue that you do need to sort of pen stuff up. Right, enough of that. What I actually was going to talk about. I was just like watching Portugal-Georgia yesterday, the football. No, don't answer that. That's true. And I suddenly thought, I was doing a talk. So the game I'm doing now is called Caravanserai. Just give you no slides or anything. Basically, it's post-collapse game. We've already had a few post-collapse themes of growing new things in Venus and so forth, so somehow sort of related. This isn't a big Fallout-style collapse. It's more like a Station 11 collapse, where everything kind of still works, but there isn't the infrastructure there. So you go around in a caravanserai is just, it's an old word, where the caravan, of course, we're talking about is the Arabic style, people traveling together with camels. I don't mean going to Butlins. Yeah. And so one of the problems that I had, and is what the talk was actually about, is how to do sort of exposition backstory without literally doing an info dump. So the classic thing is you've got a character, you want to tell them your backstory, but you don't actually want to have a screen with just their backstory, because that's like dull, and there's a certain amount of text. We all know you don't put loads of text on the screen. People don't like that. So what I try to do is look at the cycle of the game and see if I can chop bits up and put them and allow the character to sort of be explained, the backstory specifically be explained by little bits. So just as a quick summary, the cycle of the game would be, first of all, you have this single thought for the day where a character can just have a little individual thought. So there's a bit of, that's one thing you can do. And then there's route planning, where all the characters decide where they want to go, and it's all different. Like they say, there's a farmer character, he likes farms. There's a merchant character, he likes to sell things. He hasn't really got used to the traveling lifestyle yet. There's a forager who's a bit more used to the traveling, but likes to sort of extract oil and water from the land and so forth. And there's a road warrior, which is more of your sort of Mad Max style, sort of more combat related role. So he's sort of thinking of it a role-playing thing. So the question was, I'll take one of the characters, the merchant, how do I describe how their backstory, which was they were probably in banking and they were probably not interested in the traveling lifestyle, things collapsed, how do they continue? So I use different things within the game, and obviously I'm still developing it, so it's not finished. So the first thing, I had a little thought for the day. So he would have a sort of vision of the city and going, I remember I used to wake up to a city, now I wake up and most things were, wasteland, not many people to talk to because he's basically with the same set of people. So he's a bit melancholic for the past like that. The other thing is, I should look at my notes a little bit more. So the other thing is, at the end of the day, they all group together over a campfire. If you remember Donut County, that had a very, very similar design. So at the end, they all have a chat, and some of them make fun of him because he was a banker, a little bit different. So it gives him a chance to say, yes, I do miss that lifestyle. I wasn't really all that bad, and I didn't lead to the collapse of society, although actually he partly did. But, and cool. And the other thing is, when they are exploring, there are certain things that he's more familiar with. Like, for instance, they go into an office, and he's like, oh yeah, I've spent a lot of time in offices, so he's better at exploring an office. But what you do each time, you just give little clips of what is the backstory, and you thread them through all these little bits of your game system. The problem is, when you start doing your game system, you don't generally think of doing that. So you sort of have to go back and go, oh, I could adapt the system to doing things like that. So really, the sort of nub of my talk is, when you're developing your different systems, try to think how you can do things, not just moment to moment, but spend time thinking, could I use this? Could I adapt it to work on the sort of past of the character, the backstory, or anything like that? So look at your different parts of the way that you're telling your game, the way you're telling your narrative. obviously, no, people don't like doing sort of hard and fast design, but have a think about how you can adapt bits of it to do things like do exposition so you don't end up with the info dump. Always think of the info dump as a bit of a failure. I could have done this some other way. Oh, that's really Wolseley. Thanks.
My name is Katie Beach. I wanted to share a little bit about a project I just finished this year, mostly because I had a feeling there would be a lot more digital games, and this is not a digital game, it's a live game show. So just diversifying it a little bit. Like I said, my name is Katie Beach. This past year, I finished my MA in Narrative Environments at Central St. Martin's, and for that past year, I've been working on what I'm called CoCoCo, the unionization game show. Just wanted to share a little bit. So created this for my MA this past year. CoCoCo is kind of a Trojan horse style game show where I go into an office and say, this is a game show for your workplace. We're going to do some fun corporate approved team bonding. But in reality, it is a way to Trojan horse and slip in some major skills for how to labor organize and create unions in creative fields. I use it as a way to empower, way to empower creative workers in this post-pandemic landscape. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the fact that we were remote and now we're hybrid, and more offices are wanting creative or just their employees to come back to the office. So these employees have suddenly something to lose and something to gain. I thought it was a great opportunity to introduce the strategies of unions and advocacy. I also spent this time, was motivated by the fact that I wanted to research play as this method of making political concepts and quote unquote like scary things more accessible and de-radicalize them in a way that allowed people to play with the concepts, practice the skills in a quote unquote safe environment in this kind of fictional world so that they would have the skills should they want to use them IRL. So the way it works is that there are 5 levels to CoCoCo. Like I said, it's a Trojan horse. So the 5 levels are based on unionizing principles, but they are not called these union principles. The word union is not used anywhere in the game. So they are disguised in corporate buzzword language. So we have level 1 is commission, which is equal to empowerment. Level 2 is collaborate, which is equal to inclusivity. Level 3 is communicate, which leads into pay transparency. Level 4 is contract, which equals collective bargaining. And level 5 is coalition, which equals solidarity. So each of our levels are based on these 5 union principles, and they practice the skills for each of those, and they build upon each other as they go. Fairly delightful fun to play with language, and usually by level 3, where pay transparency gets introduced, the players were saying, we should form a union. And I was like, yes. So it's all a good time. Mostly I was influenced by a lot of contemporary game shows. If y'all are familiar with Taskmaster or Game Changer on Dropout, College Humor Dropout is fantastic. In fact, there was an episode on Game Changer where it was called Do I Hear $1, which was a secret unionizing game where players had to kind of collectively bargain a fair price for these really terrible dares that they had to do. So that was kind of my effort of being like, oh, well, what if we just like actually peer review this in real world environments and not with comedians? As I finished the program and finished building the game, it was a great time. I play tested it about 5 or 6 times in offices, and it was wild. Basically, the feedback I received at the end, though, was like, are you actually making an escape room? And I'm like, maybe. So there's still a lot here. I realized that there's a lot of work to do. Making a game show on your own is very hard, and it's very tricky to realize that maybe the game you were building is not the game you set out to do in the first place. Just a little learning from there. There is a trailer of like how the game works. You can scan this QR code, which will take you to my Vimeo if you want to check it out. I would play it here, but I don't believe we have time. And you can find me on Instagram at Katie____beach, just for some more fun details and other games that I've done. But mostly I just wanted to introduce myself in a very public way and say if you are into live game shows and game mechanics and game design in a more immersive, performative experience way, please talk to me because I love that stuff. Thank you.